The air of the transport ship grated on my raw nerves more than usual. I watched moisture bead and streak down the viewport, the result of my ragged breath fogging the cheap polymer. A bead of sweat, unbidden, traced the same path on my temple. I hadn't slept more than a few stolen hours since the call came, since the brass tapped me for this little off-the-books mission. "Sergeant Major Kane!" a voice crackled through the cabin. "ETA 5 minutes, final prep." "Affirmative," I confirmed. The reflection staring back at me was a stranger. Sunken eyes, the kind that saw too many hells, peered out from beneath a furrowed brow. A week's worth of stubble did little to mask the gauntness of my face. The only familiarity was in the eyes. The deadened, hollow look was the same I'd seen in every mirror since that day in Kandahar. I unstrapped myself, wincing as my joints protested, and pulled my gear from the overhead locker. The standard-issue body armor felt heavier than usual, its weight pressing down on me like a physical manifestation of the burden I carried. I ran my fingers over the worn leather of my holster, the reassuring coolness of my sidearm a stark contrast to the heat building in my gut. The ship shuddered as it entered the station's docking bay. I took a deep breath, the stale air doing little to calm my nerves. A tight knot had formed in my chest, the precursor to the nausea that always preceded a mission. A lifetime of combat had taught me to control fear, to channel it into a cold, focused rage. But this time was different. This time, the uncertainty wasn't about the enemy. It was about myself. The hatch opened, and a blast of cold air hit me like a slap in the face. The docking bay was dark, the only illumination coming from the overhead lights and the harsh glow of the status panels. "Sergeant Major Kane!" A figure emerged from the shadows, his voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. "Welcome to Karen Station." I nodded, my eyes scanning the shadows. There was something off about this place. A tension in the air, a sense of unease that went beyond the usual pre-mission jitters. The figure stepped closer, his face obscured by the dim light. A faint electronic whine emanated from him, the telltale sign of a cybernetic implant. He extended a hand, his metallic fingers glinting in the half-light. "Captain Rourke," he introduced himself. "I'm the station commander." His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth or emotion. I grasped his hand, the cold metal sending a shiver down my spine. "Kane," I replied, my voice a low growl. "Sergeant Major." Rourke gestured towards a corridor. "If you'll follow me, Sergeant Major, I'll show you to your quarters. The briefing will begin in 1 hour." He turned and walked away. I followed, my boots clanging on the metal floor. The corridor was narrow and claustrophobic, the walls lined with pipes and conduits that snaked off into the darkness. We reached a door marked with a simple number, 13. Rourke swiped a card through the reader and the door slid open with a hiss. "This is your temporary lodging, Sergeant Major," Rourke said. "The amenities are basic, but they should suffice for your needs." The room was small and Spartan, furnished with a cot, a metal desk and a chair. A single viewport offered a view of the inky blackness of space dotted with the distant lights of stars. "Thank you, Captain," I said, my voice barely audible. Rourke nodded curtly and turned to leave. 1 hour, Sergeant Major," he reminded me. "The briefing room is on level 2. The door slid shut behind him, leaving me alone in the room. I tossed my gear onto the cot and walked over to the viewport. The vastness of space, usually a source of awe and wonder, now felt cold and oppressive. I knew this mission was different. It wasn't just the secrecy surrounding it, or the vague orders I'd received. It was something else, something primal and unsettling. I turned away from the viewport and sat down on the cot. The room was silent, the only sound the steady hum of the station's life support systems. I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head. I needed to focus, to prepare myself for the briefing. But the feeling of unease persisted, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach. An hour later, I found myself standing outside the briefing room. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The briefing room was a stark contrast to the rest of the station. It was brightly lit, the walls adorned with holographic displays and tactical maps. A long metallic table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by chairs occupied by a handful of figures. Rourke stood at the head of the table, his face illuminated by the cool glow of the holoscreens. He gestured towards an empty chair. "Sergeant Major Kane, please take a seat." I obliged, the metal chair cold against my back. The other figures in the room turned to look at me, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I recognized the insignia on their uniforms. Special Forces, just like me. But there was something different about them. Their eyes were vacant, their movements stiff and mechanical. Rourke began the briefing, his voice a monotone drone. "As you are all aware, this is a classified mission of the utmost importance. Our objective is to investigate a series of anomalous readings detected in a remote sector of space." A holographic image of a star system materialized above the table. "This is the Clotho system," Rourke continued. "Our sensors have picked up energy signatures that are inconsistent with any known natural phenomenon." He paused, his eyes scanning the faces around the table. "We believe these signatures may be indicative of extraterrestrial activity." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. I kept my face impassive, but my heart pounded in my chest. Extraterrestrial activity. This was bigger than I had anticipated. "Our mission is to investigate these signatures and determine their origin," Rourke said. "We will be deploying a specialized team to the Clotho system. Sergeant Major Kane, you have been selected to lead this team." This was it. The reason I had been called here. "Your team will consist of 4 highly trained specialists," Rourke continued. "Each of them has been augmented with advanced cybernetic implants, designed to enhance their combat and survival capabilities." He gestured towards the other figures in the room. "These are your team members." I studied them carefully, noting the subtle signs of their augmentations, the glint of metal beneath their skin, the faint whirring of servos. They were more machine than man now, their humanity sacrificed for the sake of the mission. I had worked with augmented soldiers before, but never a team composed entirely of them. There was something unsettling about their vacant stares, their lack of emotion. Rourke's voice broke through my thoughts. "Your mission is dangerous, Sergeant Major. The risks are significant, but the potential rewards are even greater. If we can establish contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, it could change the course of human history." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. "Are you prepared to accept this mission, Sergeant Major?" I met his gaze. "I am," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "I am prepared." The briefing continued, Rourke outlining the details of the mission. The Clotho system was located several light years away, requiring a long and arduous journey through hyperspace. The team would be deployed in a state-of-the-art stealth ship, designed to evade detection by any potential hostiles. The briefing concluded, and Rourke dismissed the others. He remained behind, his gaze fixed on me. "I trust you have no further questions, Sergeant Major?" "Just one," I replied. "Why me? There are other soldiers with more experience in extraterrestrial encounters." Rourke's lips twitched in what might have been a smirk. "True, but none with your particular skill set." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "We've reviewed your file, Sergeant Major. Your methods are unorthodox, but effective. We need someone who can think outside the box, who can adapt to any situation." "You mean someone who's not afraid to get his hands dirty?" I retorted, the bitterness in my voice barely concealed. Rourke's smirk widened. "Precisely, Sergeant Major. You have a reputation for being resourceful, a perfect fit for this mission." "When do we leave?" I asked. "Immediately," Rourke replied. "The ship is prepped and awaiting your arrival. Your team will rendezvous with you there." I rose from my chair, my body tense with anticipation. "Understood, Captain. I'll see you on the other side." I made my way to the docking bay. The ship, a black vessel with the ominous designation Nemesis, awaited me. Its hull was covered in a matte finish that absorbed light, rendering it nearly invisible in the shadows. I boarded the Nemesis, the airlock hissing shut behind me. The interior was as Spartan as my quarters, the walls lined with monitors and control panels. The bridge was dominated by a single command chair, flanked by 2 auxiliary stations. I took my seat in the command chair, the controls familiar beneath my fingers. A holographic display flashed to life, showing the status of the ship's systems. Everything was green, ready for launch. The other members of my team arrived shortly after, their faces grim and determined. They took their positions at the auxiliary stations, their eyes fixed on the monitors. "All systems nominal," one of them reported, his voice a synthesized monotone. "Ready for hyperspace jump." I nodded, my grip tightening on the controls. "Initiate jump sequence," I commanded. The ship shuddered as the hyperspace engines engaged. The stars outside the viewport stretched and distorted, then vanished in a blinding flash of light. We were on our way to Clotho, a journey into the unknown. I glanced at the faces of my team, their eyes blank and unreadable. They were machines, devoid of fear or doubt. But I was still human, and I knew that the real danger lay not in the vastness of space, but in the darkness within. The hyperspace jump was a disorienting experience. The ship lurched and vibrated, the lights dimming momentarily. I gritted my teeth and held on, my eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of colors outside the viewport. After a while, the ship emerged from hyperspace. The stars snapped back into focus, sharp and clear against the backdrop of the void. A holographic image of the Clotho system appeared on the main display, highlighting the target planet. A small, rocky world orbiting a dim, red dwarf. "Approaching Clotho 4, the navigator announced, his voice a steady monotone. "ETA 3 hours. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion weighing heavily on me. The adrenaline rush of the launch had faded, leaving me with a bone-deep weariness. I glanced at my team, their faces as impassive as ever. They seemed unaffected by the rigors of hyperspace travel, their augmented bodies impervious to the physical strain. I envied their resilience, their ability to compartmentalize emotions and focus solely on the mission. But I also knew that their lack of humanity was a weakness as much as a strength. They lacked the intuition, the gut feeling that had saved my life countless times in the past. As the Nemesis closed in on Clotho 4, I began to brief my team on the plan. We would enter the system under stealth, using the planet's shadow to mask our approach. Once in orbit, we would deploy a recon drone to scan for the energy signatures detected by the station. The team listened in silence, their eyes fixed on the holographic displays. Their movements were precise and efficient, their responses devoid of any hesitation or doubt. They were machines, programmed to obey orders without question. As I spoke, a sense of unease crept over me. The mission parameters were vague, the potential dangers unknown. We were venturing into the unknown, a realm where anything could happen. And I had a feeling that whatever we found on Clotho 4 would be far more terrifying than anything we could have imagined. 3 hours later, the Nemesis slipped into orbit around the target planet. It was a barren world, its surface scarred by craters and canyons. The atmosphere was thin and toxic, the skies a perpetual twilight due to the dim light of the red dwarf. I gave the order to deploy the recon drone. It shot out of the ship's launch bay, its engines sputtering briefly before it disappeared into the darkness. We waited in silence, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Minutes later, the drone's signal appeared on the main display. It was transmitting a live feed of the planet's surface. The drone was flying low over a vast, empty plain, its sensors scanning the terrain for any signs of the energy signatures. Suddenly, the feed cut out. A moment later, the drone's signal disappeared from the display. "We've lost contact with the drone," the navigator announced, his voice betraying a hint of alarm. I leaned forward. "What happened?" "Unknown," the navigator replied. "The signal just vanished. We were not alone on this planet. Something had destroyed our drone." something that didn't want to be found. "Run diagnostics on the drone," I ordered, my voice tight with tension. "Running," the technician replied, his fingers dancing over a holographic keyboard. A moment later, he shook his head. "No response. The signal is completely gone." "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. We were blind now, our eyes and ears on the surface extinguished. The mission had barely begun, and already we were facing unforeseen complications. "What are your orders, Sergeant Major?" the weapons specialist asked, his voice devoid of emotion. I considered my options. We could abort the mission, return to Karen Station and report our findings, but that would mean admitting defeat, leaving the mystery of Clotho 4 unsolved. And something in my gut told me that whatever was down there was too important to ignore. "Prepare for ground deployment," I said, my voice resolute. "We're going in." The team exchanged glances, their expressions unchanged, but I sensed a shift in the air, a subtle tightening of their posture. Even these augmented soldiers, hardened by years of combat and cybernetic enhancements, were not immune to fear. We donned our environmental suits, bulky and cumbersome, but essential for survival on the hostile planet. The air was thick with the smell of rubber and ozone, a familiar scent that brought back memories of countless deployments on toxic worlds. The ship's airlock opened, revealing the alien landscape. The sky was a dull orange, the air thick with dust and particulate matter. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, making each step a conscious effort. We moved in formation, our weapons at the ready. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of our boots on the rocky ground and the rasp of our breath in our helmets. The landscape was barren, a wasteland of jagged rocks and windswept dunes. I scanned the horizon, my eyes searching for any sign of movement or life. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of desolation stretching out to the horizon. "Spread out," I ordered, my voice amplified by the comm system. "Maintain visual contact. We're looking for anything out of the ordinary." The team fanned out, their movements swift and silent. I followed, my eyes darting from side to side. We moved for hours, the landscape unchanging. The sun, a dim red orb, hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms. The air grew colder as the day progressed, the temperature dropping to a bone-chilling level. As the sun began to set, we reached a ridge overlooking a vast canyon. The walls of the canyon were sheer and jagged, their surfaces carved with strange patterns that looked almost like writing. "Hold up!" I ordered, raising my hand. "Something's not right here." The team froze, their weapons trained on the canyon. I took a step forward, my boots crunching on the loose gravel. I peered over the edge of the canyon. The sight that greeted me was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The bottom of the canyon was bathed in a blue light, the source of which was hidden in the shadows. I turned to my team, my voice barely a whisper. "We found it." "Proceed with caution," I instructed over the comm link. "Assume hostile contact imminent." We descended into the canyon, the loose scree underfoot threatening to send us tumbling into the abyss. The blue light intensified as we neared the bottom, illuminating the strange symbols carved into the rock face. They seemed to writhe and shift as we approached, a dizzying optical illusion that made my head swim. The source of the light was a massive structure, nestled at the heart of the canyon. It was a fusion of organic and mechanical elements. Its surface was a patchwork of veins and gleaming metal plates, giving the impression of a living, breathing entity. "What the hell is that?" the demolitions expert whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my eyes scanning the structure for any signs of movement or life. "But we're about to find out." We approached the structure cautiously, our weapons raised. The ground vibrated beneath our feet, the tremors growing stronger with each step. Suddenly, the structure came to life. The veins glowed brighter, the metal plates shifting and groaning. A series of openings appeared in the surface, revealing a network of tunnels and chambers. "It's opening," the communications specialist hissed. "On me!" I barked, my grip tightening on my weapon. "We're going in." We entered the structure, the blue light washing over us like a tidal wave. The air inside was hot and humid, the walls slick with a viscous fluid that shimmered in the strange light. The tunnels were narrow and winding, the floor uneven and treacherous. We moved slowly, our senses strained to the breaking point. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of our own breathing and the occasional drip of the viscous fluid. The darkness was all-consuming, the blue light providing only limited visibility. As we ventured deeper into the structure, the tunnels grew wider and more elaborate. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of alien landscapes and bizarre creatures. We rounded a corner and came face to face with a sight that froze the blood in my veins. A massive chamber stretched out before us, its walls lined with pods. Inside each pod, a humanoid figure floated, its body connected to a network of tubes and wires. The figures were pale and emaciated, their skin stretched taut over their bones. Their eyes were closed, their faces contorted in expressions of agony. "Fan out," I ordered, my voice sharp and authoritative. "Weapons hot, non-lethal if possible, but prioritize your own survival." The team moved swiftly, their boots splashing through the viscous fluid that coated the floor. The air crackled with nervous energy, the silence broken only by the clicking of our weapons as we switched them to stun. We cautiously advanced through the chamber, the blue light casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls. The pods, filled with their silent occupants, seemed to throb in unison with the structure itself. "Contact!" the demolitions expert yelled, his voice distorted by the comm system. I whirled around, my weapon raised. A figure had emerged from one of the pods, its movement slow and unsteady. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was pale and translucent, revealing the intricate network of veins and arteries beneath. Its eyes, milky white and devoid of pupils, stared blankly at us. "Hold your fire!" I ordered, my voice firm. "Let's see if it's hostile." The figure took a step towards us, its limbs shaking with the effort. It raised its arms, its hands opening and closing in a hideous mockery of a greeting. "Identify yourself!" I demanded. The figure tilted its head as if trying to understand my words. Then its mouth opened, revealing a row of needle-like teeth. A high-pitched whine emanated from its throat. "Hostile intent confirmed," the weapons specialist said, his voice cold and efficient. "Neutralize it!" I ordered, my finger tightening on the trigger. A volley of stun blasts erupted, the blue light reflecting off the figure's pale skin. It staggered backward, its limbs flailing wildly. A high-pitched wail tore from its throat, the sound ricocheting through the space and leaving a tremor in my bones. More figures began to emerge from the pods, their movements growing more coordinated with each passing second. They converged on us, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. "Open fire!" I shouted, unleashing a burst of energy from my own weapon. The chamber erupted in chaos. The figures swarmed us, their movements erratic and unpredictable. Stun blasts filled the air, the blue light flashing and strobing as the battle raged. I dodged and weaved, firing my weapon with deadly accuracy. One of the figures lunged at me, its teeth bared in a feral snarl. I sidestepped its attack and slammed the butt of my rifle into its face. It stumbled backward, its head snapping back with a sickening crack. I turned to face another attacker, but it was too late. A sharp pain erupted in my side as one of the creatures sank its teeth into my flesh. I screamed, my body convulsing in agony. I lashed out blindly, my fists connecting with something soft and yielding. The creature released me, falling to the ground with a gurgling moan. I staggered back, clutching my bleeding side. The pain was excruciating, a burning sensation that spread through my body like wildfire. I looked down at my wound, my heart sinking. The bite mark was deep and jagged, the flesh around it already turning a shade of green. I knew what this meant. I had been infected. The world began to spin, the figures around me blurring into indistinct shapes. I collapsed to the ground, my vision fading to black. As I lost consciousness, I heard the distant sound of gunfire. The battle raged on, but I was no longer a part of it. A hazy consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by a pounding headache and a burning sensation in my side. I groaned, trying to move, but my limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. My vision was blurry, the world a kaleidoscope of distorted shapes and colors. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized I was no longer in the chamber. I was lying on a cold, hard surface, my body strapped down to a table. A harsh spotlight shone in my face, blinding me momentarily. "Subject is regaining consciousness," a voice announced, cold and clinical. It was a voice I had never heard before, a voice that sent chills down my spine. I blinked, trying to focus. I could make out figures moving around me. They were dressed in white suits, their faces hidden behind masks. "Welcome back, Sergeant Major Kane," the voice said, a hint of amusement in its tone. "We've been expecting you." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and scratchy. "Where am I?" I croaked. "You're in our care, Sergeant Major," the voice replied. "Rest assured, you're in good hands." The figures moved closer, their faces still hidden behind masks. I could feel their eyes on me, cold and calculating. "What do you want?" I asked. "We want to help you, Sergeant Major," the voice said. "You've been infected, you see. But don't worry, we have a cure." "Infected?" I repeated, my voice thick with dread. "Yes, Sergeant Major," the voice said. "You've been exposed to a foreign organism, a parasite of sorts. It's taken root in your nervous system, altering your physiology." The figures moved closer, their hands reaching for me. I struggled against my restraints, but it was no use. I was helpless at their mercy. A sharp pain erupted in my side as one of the figures injected me with something. I felt my consciousness slipping away, the darkness closing in around me once more. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was the voice, cold and clinical. "Don't worry, Sergeant Major, you're going to be just fine." I awoke with a gasp, my body racked with pain. Every muscle ached, every joint protested. I blinked, my vision swimming in and out of focus. The harsh glare of the overhead lights stabbed into my eyes, making my head throb. "Ah, good, you're awake." A voice smooth and condescending cut through the haze. I struggled to turn my head, my neck muscles screaming in protest. A man stood over me, his face obscured by a surgical mask. His eyes, cold and calculating, peered at me through the glass of his protective goggles. "Who are you?" I asked, my throat raw and parched. "Dr. Lucian Crooks," he replied, his voice a chilling melody of arrogance and indifference. "I'm the chief geneticist here, and you, Sergeant Major Kane, are our most valuable asset." I tried to sit up, but restraints held me firmly in place. My eyes darted around the room, taking in the white walls, the gleaming metal instruments, the monitors displaying a dizzying array of vital signs. "What have you done to me?" I demanded, my voice laced with anger and fear. Crux chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Done to you? My dear Sergeant Major, we've given you a gift, a chance to transcend your limited human form." He leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. "You see, Sergeant Major, you've been infected with a rather unique parasite. It's a fascinating specimen. It has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of genetics." I recoiled, disgust and revulsion warring with the rising panic within me. "Parasite? What are you talking about?" Crux smiled, a predator's smile that sent chills down my spine. "The creature that bit you, Sergeant Major, it wasn't just any alien life form. It was a genetically engineered weapon designed to alter the host's DNA on a fundamental level." He paused, savoring my growing horror. "We call it the neural parasite." "You monsters!" I spat, the words tasting of bile in my mouth. "What have you done?" Crux's smile faltered, annoyance crossing his face. "We've done what any responsible scientist would do, Sergeant Major. We've secured a valuable specimen, one that could unlock the secrets of evolution itself." He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But that's not all, Sergeant Major. We have plans for you, big plans." He straightened up, his eyes gleaming with a manic light. "You see, the neural parasite has the potential to create a new breed of super soldier, a hybrid of human and alien DNA. And you, Sergeant Major, are the prototype." A cold dread settled over me, a sickening realization of what Crux and his team had in store for me. I was their lab rat, their guinea pig, their plaything, and there was nothing I could do about it. "You're insane," I croaked, my voice barely audible. Crux laughed. "Perhaps, Sergeant Major, but insanity is often the first step towards genius." Time became a distorted concept. Hours bled into days, and days into an indeterminate haze of pain, confusion, and invasive procedures. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my body a battleground between the parasite and Crux's invasive treatments. I endured excruciating surgeries, my flesh sliced open and my organs probed by cold metallic instruments. I was subjected to a barrage of drugs and experimental gene therapies, each one designed to bend my body and mind to Crux's will. In my lucid moments, I caught glimpses of the changes taking place within me. My skin grew paler, my veins darkening, my senses sharpened, my reflexes quickening to an almost superhuman level. I could hear the faintest whisper, see in near total darkness, and smell the subtle chemical changes in the air. But these enhancements came at a terrible price. The parasite was rewiring my brain, altering my thoughts and perceptions. I experienced flashes of alien memories, fragmented images of strange landscapes and monstrous creatures. My own thoughts became increasingly erratic, my emotions a volatile cocktail of rage, fear, and despair. Crux and his team monitored my every move, their masked faces a constant source of dread. They subjected me to a battery of tests, pushing me to my physical and mental limits. They seemed fascinated by my transformation, their eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of scientific curiosity. One day, as I lay strapped to the operating table, Crux approached me, a syringe filled with a glowing green liquid in his hand. "Today, Sergeant Major," he declared, his voice brimming with excitement, "we take the next step in your evolution." He plunged the needle into my arm, the liquid coursing through my veins like a venomous snake. I convulsed in agony, my body racked with spasms. The pain was a white-hot inferno that threatened to consume me. As the drug took effect, my vision blurred, the world dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. I heard Crux's voice, distant and muffled, as he spoke of genetic manipulation, of unlocking the hidden potential within me. Then everything went dark. When I awoke, I was no longer the same. The pain had subsided, replaced by a cold, numbing emptiness. I looked down at my hands, the skin now a mottled grey, the veins glowing with an unnatural light. I flexed my fingers, marveling at their newfound strength and agility. I was no longer fully human. I was a chimera, a fusion of man and alien, a living weapon forged in the crucible of scientific hubris. And as I rose from the table, my eyes burning with a newfound hatred, I knew that my creators would soon regret the day they brought me into existence. A feral rage, an alien fury surged through me. I ripped the restraints from the table, the metal shrieking in protest. The scientists scattered, their masks hiding their surprise and fear. "Contain him!" Crux's voice shrieked, the facade of calm confidence shattered. But it was too late. The parasite's enhancements were in full effect. I was faster, stronger, deadlier. I lunged at the nearest scientist, my hands closing around his throat. I could feel his life pulse beneath my fingers, frail and fleeting. With a twist of my wrist, I silenced it. The others scrambled to escape, their movements clumsy and panicked. But I was a predator unleashed, a whirlwind of violence fueled by an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I hunted them through the corridors, my footsteps silent as death. I cornered one in the lab, his hands shaking as he fumbled with a weapon. I disarmed him with a flick of my wrist, then drove my fist through his chest, feeling the crunch of ribs beneath my knuckles. Another met his end in the observation room, his screams of terror abruptly cut short as I snapped his neck. The others fell in quick succession, their lives extinguished in a flurry of brutal efficiency. Crux was the last. I found him cowering in his office, his eyes wide with terror. He babbled incoherently, pleading for his life, but I felt no mercy, only a cold, consuming rage. I grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off his feet. His eyes bulged, his face turning a mottled purple. I squeezed, feeling the life drain from his body. His struggles weakened, then ceased altogether. I dropped his lifeless body to the floor, a hollow thump, marking the end of his reign of terror. The facility was silent now, the only sound the hum of machinery and the drip of blood from my hands. I walked out of the facility, the cold air a shock to my system. The alien landscape stretched out before me, the red sun casting long shadows across the barren wasteland. I had no idea where I was or what to do next, but one thing was certain. I was no longer a soldier, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. I was something else entirely. Something dangerous, something alien. The parasite had changed me, transformed me into a weapon, and as I set out into the unknown, I knew that the architects of my suffering had unleashed a terror they could not fathom.